All right, so we're diving into something pretty powerful today. The Prisoner of Love, by Father Lasance. And I think a lot of us are really hoping to get a better sense of, what is he trying to tell us about the Eucharist? Especially, for us as Catholics and how we're supposed to be living that out.
Yeah, it's definitely a strong message. He really gets right to the heart of it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's not subtle at all about believing, fully in the real presence. He just comes right out and says, the God of the Tabernacle is the risen Christ.
Absolutely. And he doesn't stop there. He really wants us to understand the depths of that.
Yeah.
Going into the idea that Jesus is there after the manner of spirits, which is a big concept.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a mind bender sometimes for me, right? What
Yeah.
does that even mean for us?
Yeah.
It seems very mysterious.
I think the best way to think about it is that Jesus is completely present, totally present in the host. And every single particle of it, no matter how small. But it's not like a physical presence the way we think of it, right? It's spiritual. It's beyond our everyday experience.
Okay, I'm kind of getting that. But, one of the things that really hit me hard was he's not just okay with us, saying we believe. He really pushes us to consider what it actually means to have, a real living faith in the real presence. How does that change our actions?
Right. It can't just be head knowledge. It's got to affect our hearts too.
Exactly. And then it's almost like he's calling us out. He's a lot of times Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, he's unknown as a stranger. And this is the saddest part, is not loved.
Yeah, it's a real wake-up call. We can get so comfortable, just going through the motions, but are we really giving him that love and devotion in the Eucharist?
It made me stop and think about okay, am I really doing that? And of course, he's not just going to leave us hanging, right?
Yeah.
He has to give us a solution. So he's all about these frequent visits to the Blessed Sacrament. And I love how he uses that analogy, about where our treasures are. That's where our heart is going to be too. It's okay, where are we spending our time and energy?
Yeah, actions speak louder than words, right? If we say we love Jesus in the Eucharist, but then where's the proof in our daily lives?
I know. And he has this amazing story about King Alphonsus XII. So here's this king, right? And he walks with the Blessed Sacrament to somebody's house, a humble home, just full of reverence, walking beside it.
Can you imagine? Here's this king being so humble in front of the Eucharist, makes you think about how we approach it,
Yeah, if a king can be that reverent, what are we doing? It really makes you think about, okay, how can we step up our game? How can we be better in our adoration?
That's a question Father Lasance wants us all to ask ourselves. It's about recognizing who's truly present there, right? The king.
Yeah.
And how we need to respond to that.
Yeah. And it's not just adoration. This guy's all about frequent communion too, reminding us that, the Council of Trent, they actually wanted people to receive communion at every Mass.
It's cool how he presents it, though. It's not follow the rules. It's more frequent communion, that's your path to being closer to God, to becoming holier.
He really believes that if we receive the Eucharist more often, it's keeping us connected to Christ all the time, which then, leads to these graces, and it just helps us grow spiritually.
Yeah, and he talks about that longing we should have for that union with Christ. He uses that story about Blessed Imelda, the little girl. She just desperately wanted to receive communion, and it ended up happening miraculously.
Oh, I love that story. But, let's be real for a minute. We all make excuses. Sometimes we think we're not worthy or, I have these venial sins, I can't go. I've totally been there.
It's such a common thing, but Father Lasance just reminds us, guys, God's love and mercy, it's huge, right? There's no limit to it. We don't have to be perfect to receive him.
Exactly. It's more about approaching the Eucharist with that love and wanting to be with Christ. That's what really matters to him.
Right. And, he also connects these visits to the Blessed Sacrament with, making up for the ways other people are indifferent, which I think is really beautiful. When we spend time with Jesus, we're not just helping ourselves. We're offering comfort and love for those who are ignoring him.
And I love the story he uses with St. Paulinus to explain that. Paulinus, he offered himself up as a prisoner to save this widow's son.
It's such a powerful comparison to what Jesus does for us in the Eucharist. He's our prisoner of love, right?
Yeah.
He's sacrificing himself and waiting for us to come to him.
That image really stuck with me. And he really wants us to think about, okay, what are those useless visits we make in our lives? What if we replace those with visits to Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament?
It's he's not just sitting there passively. He really wants us, our souls. There's this urgency in his message that I think we need to take seriously.
It's that longing, right?
Yeah.
he has for us. It just ties in so perfectly with the title, The Prisoner of Love. Like that image, it really gets to the heart of what he's saying.
It's a love that's completely free. He gives it so freely. And yet so often we just don't give it back. It's like Father Lasance wants to reawaken that love in us, get us to actually respond.
And we can't talk about Father Lasance without bringing up Mary, right? I mean, his respect for her and how she connects to the Eucharist. He even calls her the first living tabernacle. It's such a beautiful way to put it.
When you think about it, it makes sense. I mean, Mary carried Jesus, right?
Yeah.
In her womb. She nourished him, protected him. And it's like, it points towards the Eucharist, where he continues to nourish us, protect us, but in this spiritual way.
Yeah. And he uses that example of Mary going to visit Elizabeth and how, just her being there, it brought this joy. And even the Holy Spirit came. It's like a reminder that, our love for Mary, it should bring us closer to the Eucharist.
It's not one or the other. They're connected. Like Mary shows us how to really receive Jesus, how to cherish him, not just, physically, but with our whole souls.
Okay, so we've gone through a lot. It's pretty clear, I think, that Father Lasance wants us to have this, deep and real love for Jesus in the Eucharist. But I'm wondering, okay, what does that look like in everyday life with everything going on? How do we actually do that?
He does give us some practical steps, we got to start by choosing to make that relationship a priority, putting Jesus in the Eucharist first.
And frequent confession, right. He's a big believer in that, not just, to clear our conscience, but to really prepare ourselves to receive the Eucharist in a worthy way.
Yeah, preparation is key. He also talks about, before Mass, taking time to get ready, and then afterwards, really spending time in Thanksgiving. It's not just about showing up. It's about making that time count,
Right.
Really being present with Jesus.
One thing I found really helpful was his advice on spiritual communions. Throughout the day, when you can't actually receive the Eucharist, just taking a moment to invite Jesus into your heart.
Yeah, it's a way to stay connected all the time, no matter what's happening, to keep that relationship going.
But it's not just about us, is it? I mean, Father Lasance makes it clear, receiving the Eucharist, that's supposed to affect how we act in the world.
Totally. It's got to go beyond us. It's about letting that love change how we treat people, how we work, how we deal with relationships, everything.
So it's not just about receiving, it's about becoming a reflection of that love for everyone else to see.
Exactly. It's like every time we receive communion, it's sending us on a mission. We're supposed to take that love and bring it to others.
Wow, that's a really powerful way to think about it. We're not just sitting there being fed, we're part of something bigger. We're actually helping him do his work. So as we're kind of wrapping up this deep dive into the Prisoner of Love, I mean, there's a lot here, a lot to think about, a lot to pray about, and even more to actually put into practice.
Yeah, Father Lasance, he gives us this roadmap, it's like how to get closer to Jesus in the Eucharist, how to become those prisoners of love. It's tough, for sure, but it's worth it. It takes us to the center of our faith, to what really matters.
And what struck me was how practical he is.
Yeah.
And encouraging. He doesn't just point fingers and say, you're doing this wrong. He actually gives us ways to improve, to grow, to be holier.
It's like he keeps saying, this isn't about being perfect, it's about trying. It's about making progress, one little step at a time.
And ultimately, it's about giving our hearts to Jesus completely.
Yeah.
Letting his love change us from the inside out.
And that change, it starts with us, but it can spread. It can touch everyone around us.
So, as we're finishing up this episode, what's sticking with you? What from Father Lasance really stood out? For me, it's, he keeps talking about how much God loves us, how merciful he is. And it's so easy to forget that, to think, oh, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And that can stop us from really wanting the Eucharist, from appreciating it.
Yeah.
But Father Lasance, he really makes me feel like, okay, it's going to be all right.
Yeah, he's like, what matters is that we love Jesus, that we want to be with him. He doesn't expect perfection, just a heart that's open, a heart that's humble.
It's like a weight off your shoulders, right? We don't have to be perfect. We can just focus on that love.
And then that love, it pours out into everything we do. It changes how we treat people, how we handle tough times, how we see the world, literally everything.
The other thing that really hit me was how Father Lasance connects our love for the Eucharist to our love for Mary. It's like he sees them as this package deal. They go together.
He's saying that Mary, she's the ultimate example. She shows us how to receive Jesus, how to treasure him, not just with our bodies, but with our whole beings,
Yeah, she's guiding us, leading us to her son.
And, in the world today, things are so crazy, so focused on stuff. I think Father Lasance's message is like more important than ever. He's calling us back to the core of our faith, to what really matters.
He's reminding us that the Eucharist isn't just something we do because we have to. It's a real encounter with Christ, and it can change everything.
And to wrap up this deep dive, I think Father Lasance is leaving us with a question. How can we become those prisoners of love for Jesus, like he talks about?
It's a question that makes us think, okay, it's not just about saying the words, it's about living it. About love, devotion, giving ourselves to Christ completely.
It's a call to let that love shine out, to touch everyone we meet.
So as we go from here, let's try to become those prisoners of love. Let's let the Eucharist change us, make our hearts new, and inspire us to share that love with everyone.
Because that's what Father Lasance is all about. Love that sets us free and gives us the strength to live our faith in a way that means something.